21 here, back with another Splinterlands video. So obviously a lot to talk about in regards to the announcement we got yesterday from Splinterlands that they are reducing the size of their team by about 45%, which is certainly not insubstantial. And so what we're going to do today, I'm not going to be doing any channel marketing in terms of, like and subscribe. We're just going to get right into it. This is a pretty, serious topic that people want to hear about. I'm just going to give a little outline for what we're going to do in this video. First, we are going to go through the post in town hall discussion. Then I'm going to talk about some of the sort of the optimistic side of this, some of the good takeaways you could have. I'm going to talk about the bad side of it, obviously. And then also going to talk about where that leaves me, what my current thought is, both from playing the game, an investor in the game, a player of the game, as well as, a content creator. I make money from talking about this game, just like I do from playing the game. But before we do that, I do want to mention that ultimately we're talking about people's jobs and livelihoods here. So I want to keep that in mind as I'm going through and making this video. And I want you guys to keep that in mind as you're thinking about this and talking about it in all of the spaces, right? So for me, I talk about the game. And that's going to be the main focus ultimately of this video, right? What does this mean for the game moving forward? But and I don't want to miss the forest for the trees here and recognize that, again, we are talking about a game that we play and we've invested money into, but for some of these people, right, this was their income. This was how they made money. And, they were welcomed members of this community. They put in a ton of good work directly into this game, and they deserve to be applauded for that. And it's unfortunate that people ultimately did end up, losing jobs and losing income. But hopefully, months down the line, when we've pulled out of this bear market, some people will either hopefully already be back working in other positions, or maybe there'd be opportunities to come back. So again, from here on, most of the topic is going to be about the game and what moves forward from here. But we'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, it's important to acknowledge and remember that people did lose their jobs here. And that, to me, is the most important thing. And I wish them all the best. Hopefully you remain a part of this community. And I look forward to continuing interacting with, everyone here. So, okay, let's get into the game portion. So first we're going to walk through this post, and then I have three sort of main takeaways from the town hall discussion that I wanted to mention. So today we had to make the extremely difficult decision to reduce the size of Splinterlands by roughly 45%. I know this is a big part. Before anyone asks, they did not have any funds in FTX or at-risk exchanges or services. They don't use any debt or have any leverage. So I know there's a lot of questions about, is Splinterlands going to get tied up in FTX or any of these other things? There's been other games in the play-to-earn space that did get caught up in some of the craziness, but it seems like Splinterlands did not, which is, first of all, fantastic, because I think some of these games are not going to be able to make it through the damage that FTX and some of these other exchanges have caused to the ecosystem. So the company had built up a long runway of funds in a combination of cash and crypto, and we used those funds throughout the year to build a roadmap. Unfortunately, the weakening cryptocurrency market, in addition to broader markets, right? That's another thing to remember here. We're not just talking about crypto. If you zoom out, we are in a global economic environment that is less than ideal. It was a double whammy for our business. Not only the value of our cryptocurrency decreases, shortening our runway, but also the amount of revenue that the business could bring in dropped, as our community also felt the effects of the falling market. Within the recent And, we talked about this on the, there's just less money available right now. And that's why I've sort of talked about, this is the time to make improvements to the game. And it's not necessarily the time to be offering things, but that hurts their revenue ultimately, right? Because the company has to make money so the company can pay its employees. So they're now going to shift their focus to delivering. Going forward, the Splinterlands team will be 100% focused on one thing: delivering our promises to the community. No new games, no pre-sales for the foreseeable future. Despite the smaller team, we believe we can be much more efficient through being laser focused on delivering value to the community, our most important asset. I think it's good to have that. They will be working on an updated roadmap for 2023 that they plan to release before the end of the year, and they expect it will at least contain the following items. So let's read down. Land. That being number one in capitalized made me, in a post that's otherwise, kind of sad. The acknowledgement that this needs to be next, I think is great. Rooney, got to see that through, got to finish that. Talking about this in detail is a separate thing. Tower defense, rebellion, and I would probably put this lower down on the list. I don't think they did this in order or anything, but land being one did make me smile. Rebellion to me would be below a lot of things here, but if this was the order of importance. SPS validator nodes, new player experience. So this got added. Super important, super important. We need to get this right before the next full run. So putting that on here, I think is important. It needs to be living on the roadmap until we're in a place where new players just have a much better experience. I don't know how else to say it. Gameplay and reward updates. So keeping going on this. They're saying new to help address advantages gained by bots. So it seems like, again, focused. They're calling out and naming bots specifically, which I think is good. DEC and voucher syncs, and then Genesis League goals. So again, you sort of see a combination of Genesis League goals, tower defense, Rooney, projects that were already started, need to continue. People have invested in those. Great. And then other than that, it's very specific things that are needed. So this increased focus, we're going to talk about the good and the bad, but spoiler alert, cutting it down to these things. We're not trying to recruit celebrities or anything like that. We're focusing on the core components of the game. Through the restructuring of the company accompanied by a planned capital raise, so this is something we'll talk about in a little bit, we can put ourselves in a position where we don't need to worry about running out of runway. We can instead focus on executing on the above roadmap, which we believe will bring immense value into the ecosystem and to the community over the long term. So to our community, we recognize that the crypto space community is not just important, it is the heart and soul of these projects, and Splinterlands is no exception. We know that that's what got us here, and we will eventually propel the project to new heights in the future. What makes the community so much more important in Web3 is asset ownership. Asset ownership creates a much closer connection between company and customers, and even customers and other customers. We are all in this together, and we're doing the work together to get through it. Some people may see this as a reason to sell their assets and move on. Again, something we'll talk about. As much as we hate to see anyone go, we also celebrate the fact that they owned assets which they are free to sell when they wish. For everyone else, we believe this marks the new beginning for Splinterlands. With these changings, we have positioned the organization to ride out a long and protracted bear market and/or global recession, while at the same time continuing to build out our products and delivering value for the community. Then they just sort of announced the Discord town hall that they ran. Okay, so a couple things I wanted to talk about in terms of the Discord town hall, if you missed it. You should listen to the whole thing. I don't know how to do that, actually. With Discord, I don't know if it's posted or saved somewhere. That'll be for someone else to help you with. But a couple key points. So in terms of the areas that were cut, I think the main thing to know is that I believe the first number was 23, but they went from 23 to 17 engineers. So the engineering group was not one of the spaces that saw the most significant cuts, which I think is important. Ultimately, it's the engineers that are going to be building out all of these things that got listed right here. So keeping a sufficient engineering team was something I was looking for specifically. And they're smart people, so 23 to 17 engineers. Happy with that answer. There was a question on how much runway do they currently have under this new cost structure? And the answer was 14 months at the low end and 21 months of runway at the high end. Now, how you feel about that answer, is kind of up to you. So it's anywhere from a year to almost 2 years of runway. I think that's fine. I don't really have strong opinions on that, but it seems like, if you're going to tell me they're going to be good for over a year, sort of just buying time, waiting for the markets to hopefully turn around as they continue to build out stuff they've already started. I'm fine with that. If that number didn't sort of jump off the page to me as a big negative or anything, but other people might disagree. And then finally, they went into more details about the potential to raise capital, specifically equity capital. So we're going to talk more deeply about this in the good and bad section that we're going to move on to next. But basically what they said was they would be selling ownership stakes in, I don't know if you don't know how raising capital works. Basically, the company sells ownership for cash at a certain multiple. So, I don't know if you've ever watched Shark Tank or whatever, but if you're going to sell, 50% of something at $1 million for that 50%, that means your company is valued at $2 million, right? They said in the town hall that they are going to be selling their own ownership stakes, right? This doesn't affect players directly, right? Agrode and Yabamat, and whoever else is going to be selling their own ownership stakes in the game to raise cash. And I don't think this was worked into my understanding at least, was it wasn't worked into the 14 to 21 months of runway number. They also mentioned that they might have ways for the Splinterlands community to get ownership stakes in Splinterlands, right? They might be offering equity directly to the community. I assume part of it is, they've said that they've approached bankers, they've talked to bankers, and it seems like they feel pretty confident they'll be able to raise a couple $1 million. Again, we'll talk about specifics in the good and bad, but those are the details of the potential equity raise. And I actually asked a question on this based on, generally speaking, you don't want to raise equity capital when markets are bad, during a bear market, because what that does is it sets a multiple floor for your company, right? If you raise at a certain valuation and that valuation happens at a bear market, that valuation is going to be low, right? Lower compared to probably the equilibrium. If you raise in the midst of a bull market, your valuation is probably going to be high compared to sort of one of the equilibrium values of what the company should be at. But the number you raise at also affects future potential raises or opportunities, right? So let's say 2 years from now, Splinterlands is in a better spot and they're trying to maybe sell the company to a big game developer, or, I'm totally hypothesizing, right? Or maybe a huge investor. That investor is going to see the raise that occurred in the midst of the bear market, and that's sort of going to set a anchor point, right? So if they raise at a low valuation, you then have to answer the questions, okay, you raised at a $5 million valuation, why are you now trying to raise at a $25 million valuation? So it's just, the concept is generally you don't want to be raising equity capital in a bear market. But I asked that question and I thought they had a good answer. They acknowledge this isn't, they don't want to be raising equity capital here either. And that is going to directly come from them. But again, we'll talk about that specifically in the good and the bad section. All right, let's move on to the good and the bad section. Let's start with good. So, good number one is that costs are cut, right? So, there's a reason why, like right now, if you look around the tech sphere, look at Amazon, look at Facebook or Meta or whatever you want to call it, look at Google. Twitter's a little bit of a different story that isn't, we can't address that here. But a lot of these big tech companies are cutting jobs. They're cutting 10%, 15%, whatever the number is, of their workforce. So first of all, right, this is kind of what happens during slowdowns, whether that be a crypto bear market or a global economic turndown like we've seen sort of across the world. Jobs get cut, and that's unfortunate. But it's part of the economic cycle. So generally, when you look at these companies, when they announce big job cuts, their stock price bumps up. And that's because costs are cut, right? Expenses are now lower. It's easier to operate the company with less overhead. It's more efficient to operate a company with less overhead. So again, generally speaking, cost cutting is a good thing, assuming the firm, is going to be here in 3 years, which we're going to talk about in the bad section, but I have no reason to believe that. Not that I don't have any reason. I personally think the company's in a good spot, at least from a mentality perspective, to get through this. But again, first good, costs are much lower now than they were previously. And again, there's a reason why I talked about people's jobs in the beginning and wanted to acknowledge that, because when you just talk about costs being cut, it's sort of easy to remove the actual people that are being cut. And that's not something I'm trying to do, or is the focus of this, right? I need to just talk strictly about the game and the company. And the fact is, costs are now lower. Okay. Number two, improved focus. This is almost like a wake-up call, I think, when companies have to do this, right? I'm sure there's a lot of side projects. There's a lot of sort of things on the peripheral that, things are getting that are getting looked at. Think about some of the stuff that's been talked about, whether it be voice stuff or game animations, which are all sort of nice to haves. But as all of those little tiny side projects get worked on, it distracts from the main focus and the main deliverables that the game and the community need. And that's what you see right here with this list. You now lose the ability to look at these side things, look at the nice to haves. When you have to cut 45% of your workforce, it becomes the core things that get focused on, because you do not have the ability to focus on things that aren't that. And ultimately, I think that's good for the game, right? These main deliverables are what's going to be the stuff we're getting updates on. It's going to be the core focus of the game, both from a necessity standpoint, because again, don't have the people, as well as a focus standpoint. Like, if you have to cut 45% of your workforce, that is a wake-up call. And I'm not saying it's the game's fault. A lot of it is just the conditions of the crypto environment we're in. But it's a scary wake-up call for the people that are still there, for the leadership team, for the board, for the management team. You almost get, you just get a sort of a kick in the pants, to put it in a PG way, to get going on the stuff that really, really, really matters. And I think they understand that, and that's sort of what this list is right here. And then finally, one of the good pieces of news that comes from this is they seem very confident in their ability to raise money, which is not a given, right? Specifically for really, really small companies. It's not easy to, I don't want to say easy, it's just not something that's guaranteed. You're going to be able to approach bankers, during the midst of a, bear market or global turndown and be able to raise money, right? Just the fact that they are confident in their ability to raise money, I think is a good thing. All right, let's talk about some of the bad stuff. Again, first, 45% of people lost their jobs. That's going to create upset community members, right? There's going to be finger pointing. There is going to be, why did this person stay, but this person didn't? This person should get fired. We should bring this person back. This is going to take a toll on the community for sure. Whether that be people who were fired, who people don't think should have been fired, whether it just be general panic, right? A move like this tosses up red flags for people. And you just sort of have to acknowledge that. The second thing is back to the raising money thing. And I talked about this more than I wanted to in the beginning. But raising money on bad terms has downsides for the future. Ultimately, if that's what they have to do, that's what they have to do for the game to survive. But you just don't want to raise money at a time when multiples are contracting. And the other thing is, bringing more outside ownership into the game can potentially throw things off, right? If you have a VC come in, it doesn't sound like they're selling big proportions of their ownership stake, at least that's not the feeling I got from the town hall. But if you have VCs come in who have their own ideas and stuff, it can just muddy the waters. Some of them might have good ideas, some of them might be very helpful. It's just, at some point you get to the too many cooks issue where, if you have people pulling in different directions or people with tons of different opinions, the water can get murkier. And the last thing, obviously, is what if this isn't it? So I talked about in the good section that it's pretty normal for tech companies, Facebook, Meta, whatever, Amazon, Google, to cut jobs, to cut their workforce during economic downturns. The difference is, the reason why those are always viewed as a good thing is because there's a difference between a company like Amazon or Facebook and Meta or Alphabet/Google in trimming, quote unquote, trimming the fat than it is for Splinterlands to do the same thing. Now, people and in general, the markets believe that Amazon is going to be here for decades and decades and decades and decades. And, there's no reason to think that it won't be. So a 10% reduction in workforce, people don't bat an eye, right? The downside here for Splinterlands is they're not one of those companies, right? They're doing everything they can, but it would be irresponsible to think that this is necessarily it, right? This is the end of what they have to do. I do like that they sort of, it wasn't a small cut, right? They came in and they said 45% of people. So it was a significant cut. So I'm hopeful that this is it. But when you're talking about a small company, specifically in a volatile area like crypto, this might not be it. And it'd be irresponsible for me to sit here and say that I know this is it, the bad times are over, this is the bottom, this is the worst that we're going to see. I don't know if that's true. So, sort of pulling up the red flag for the first time doesn't necessarily mean more red flags aren't going to be popping up over the span of the next couple weeks and months. All right, so where does that leave me in sort of some of my own personal opinions? To be completely honest, I am a little surprised they didn't do this earlier. A lot of crypto companies, a lot of tech companies, as I talked about, have cut their workforce. And maybe I got lulled a little bit into a sense of security because Splinterlands hadn't done it for so long that I was thinking, oh, maybe they just don't have to. Maybe they're in a financial position that I thought, was even better than I thought right? And they don't have to make any cuts, even though everyone around them is making cuts for the most part. But ultimately that wasn't true. Did waiting this long mean they had to do one big, more dramatic cut? Maybe. But overall, like, the fact that they cut some of their workforce isn't surprising to me. It's not this big cause of panic in a vacuum. So overall, like, I'm not super surprised the workforce was cut. 45% is probably a little higher than I was thinking. But, the action of cutting jobs, not super surprising. And that sort of brings us to this crossroads, right? They talk about, in the last paragraph here, they know that for some people, this might be it, right? They might be selling off their assets and, panic and move on. And you're at this weird crossroads where you're going to get the two parties, right? Just to spoil my opinion on this, you're going to have people like me that are saying, this is a great time if people are going to start panic selling everything. Generally speaking, that's when you want to be a buyer. This is true across all ecosystems that survive the long term, I should say, right? When you look about stocks, when you look about, housing, whatever it is, look back to any stock market panic or stock market blow up. And the people that were buying all the way through are the ones who ultimately end up in the best spot at the end. Now, obviously, when you're talking about buying stocks in US companies versus buying assets in a tiny crypto game, not the same thing, right? These US companies, most of them survive for the long term, even through the rough patches. Not necessarily true about crypto companies, specifically games. So, that dynamic is going to create two separate factions, basically. Again, people like me who are going to say these are the best times to buy for the reasons I just said. If people are going to be selling their assets at super, super, super depressed prices, I want to be a buyer during that period. Because if Splinterlands does make it through the bear market, I will have picked up really awesome things for really cheap prices. And as people hopefully at some point come flooding back into this space in general, asset prices start moving up, people start coming back into the game, and then the game specific asset prices start moving up, I will have been buying things at the low. Then you're gonna have the other side where this is it, right? They want to sell their stuff, they want to get out, they want to recoup some of their investment while they still can. Or if they were here early, maybe there's some early people here who have locked in huge, massive gains, and they're like, you know what? I was really successful for this. I don't want to lose it all. I want to cash out a big portion, like whatever it is. One of these two groups will be right? We're gonna look back 18 months from now, and it'll either be, I can't believe I sold all my stuff then. Or I can't believe I wasn't buying more stuff then. That's insane. I should have known that. Everything's going to be hindsight. Or the other reality, there's going to be people sitting here who had cashed out being like, oh, imagine if I didn't sell then. Or on the flip side, like, I can't believe I just kept buying all the way down. And either side, whoever's right is going to obviously be the ones taking victory laps, but we don't really know. So I can only really tell you what I'm going to be doing. And what I'm going to be doing is buying any sort of panic. So I'm going to be watching the market, and if I see, depressed prices, it's something I'm probably going to pounce on. And I'm going to make a video of me doing an initial round of this, actually. But that's not to say that I'm not using this opportunity to reevaluate some things. So one thing in particular, and I've sort of been grappling with this decision, I'm pulling all my cards off the rental market because I've been renting all my cards, and I want to start playing again this season. But I actually just saw the part I was going to talk about. Kitty. So, this card is worth, $5,000, which is about a third of my total deck. And this card has held up well, even as prices around it have sort of started to fall. Is this a potential opportunity for me to have the best of both worlds? And that is sell my kitty for, around $5,000. I think that's still the price. Yeah, so a little under $5,000. I am sitting on liquidity, so when things pop up that I think are good opportunities in this panic to pick up on, I'm able to pounce slowly over time. But then on the flip side, I'm sitting in liquidity where if stuff gets worse, and maybe we do see these higher end cards that thus far have done pretty well maintaining their value. I mean, actually you see from this row here, these cards are all pretty significantly cheaper than they were previously. But Llama, Jotun ticked down a little bit. Kitty has not ticked down at all. But is this an opportunity for me to not take a little off the table, just get some dry powder ready? And that's something I'm thinking about. And I think it would be foolish not to think about it. I think over the next week or so, I'm going to wait for all of my cards sort of to unrent. And once I have everything in front of me, I'm going to take a look at where do the prices currently stand? Do I need to do some reconfiguring of my deck? As there's stuff that's run up in price that hasn't fallen in price that I think is now a good opportunity to help stockpile some dry powder to then put into both as a safety net as well as put into assets that have fallen in price. I just think it's a good time, even if you're here for the long haul, like I am, to be questioning these things, to be thinking about these things, to be reevaluating where you stand. Take a look at your entire deck and reevaluate your plan. Are you on the right track? Are you not on the right track? Is there stuff here? You could say Splinterlands trimmed some fat from a cost perspective. It's time for you to do the same. Just be responsible. Only you can talk. Only you can think through sort of your own financial situation and where you're at in the game. And yeah, just don't rush into anything. Don't panic. Be thoughtful and consider things, right? Luckily I had a little built-in thing here with Kitty where, I'm forced to, for another at least 10 hours, forced to think about it before I can toss it up on the market. But I'm thinking critically about it. Maybe this is the time to cash out of one of my major assets. Not cash out, but just get liquid of one of my major assets to have some dry powder, both as a safety net and to reinvest across the game. All right, this is going to be, obviously it was going to be a long video, but just to wrap it up, I'm personally not as panicked as a lot of other people are. I think this is a general thing that occurs across, specifically high growth areas when you hit a downturn in a cycle. Now, there's obviously added area of concern just given the size of Splinterlands and how young and new of a company it is that, maybe this isn't it. And it's stuff that you need to be thinking about critically. And overall, that's what I would encourage. Patience, critical thinking, and make an informed decision that is best for you. I will still be here making content. I personally believe in the long-term viability of this game. I think what they're building is great. I think the increased focus is going to be a positive thing, but it would be irresponsible for me not to at least mention that, this is certainly a red flag. Okay, I'm going to stop it there. I am going to have some more positive videos coming out shortly. There's, actually, I think I just hit 1,500 subscribers. Yeah, this caught up to me. Normally I like to do my giveaways before I hit this number, but I hit it before I could make the video. So I am going to have a celebration giveaway, so stay tuned for that. I'm probably going to do some bargain hunting as the prices keep falling, if prices keep falling. So you might see a bargain hunting video. And then also I'm working on a project with my community, potential project. It's not fully settled yet, but I'm working on a potential project with my community to almost create a massive fund to potentially take advantage of, a major panic or a major downturn in the market where, if people wanted to get out of big positions quickly, we would offer liquidity to you. We would be looking on the market for, cards that are priced super low and either to flip them or to, hold them for rent or whatever it is. So I'm going to make a video outlining that, both from if you want to be involved in the fund, how you can do that, and then as well as if you're looking for massive amounts of liquidity because you want to get out of positions quick, that might be a potential option for you. But that's still in the works, maybe a week away from being finalized. So just stay tuned for that. All right, I'm gonna stop it there. I assume there's gonna be a lot of comments, conversation points. I know this video was long and rambling. Anyone who made it here, I really appreciate it. Let me know what you guys think. Obviously, big day in Splinterlands history. Good luck to everyone, and I will talk to you guys soon.